What if the hunter was once the hunted? What if the past you run from is the one that shapes your future? In the Badlands, where monsters and men collide, one woman's darkest memories return to claim her. Before the town burned, before the predator stalked, there was only a girl with a past she couldn't escape, a weapon she couldn't put down, and a curse she couldn't break. In a world of blood and betrayal, she won't just survive, she will fight. This is the untold story of Sister Grace. This is Predator Badlands. Welcome to FLIXOR, where the legend begins. The early evening sun bled a deep, rusty red across the vast Montana sky, casting long, skeletal shadows over the barren plains. In the distance, a forgotten town clung to existence, battered by years of dust storms, poverty, and isolation. Its wooden buildings were weathered, their paint peeling and roofs sagging under the burden of time. A tattered sign swung lazily in the dry wind, "Welcome to Barlow Creek, Pop 127. The number had been crossed out and rewritten too many times to count. Life here moved like molasses, slow, thick, and weighed down by unspoken sorrows. Most of the townsfolk were farmers or ex-miners, scraping by with odd jobs. Crime festered in the shadows, where law enforcement dared not look. Hope was a commodity more rare than rain. On this particular evening, the town sat heavy with unease. Old man Chester, the town drunk, staggered out of Miller's saloon, muttering curses under his breath. He paused, feeling a sudden prickle at the nape of his neck. The air had grown heavier, thick, charged with something unseen but palpably wrong. A strange hum resonated faintly, like the deep thrumming of a distant machine. Chester squinted toward the grain silo at the edge of town. In the dying light, something shimmered, a distortion like heat rising from asphalt, but it was freezing cold. His breath misted in front of him, though the day had been hot. Before he could shout, the silence shattered. A snap and whir sounded overhead. A feral growl, not from any earthly animal, rumbled through the stillness. Chester's head jerked toward the sound just in time to see the faint outline of a monstrous figure, nearly invisible, cloaked in bending light, lunging from the shadows. Screaming, he stumbled backward, crashing into a pile of old crates. The figure moved with terrifying speed and precision. A whip-like blade arced through the air, slicing cleanly through one of the crates as Chester scrambled away on all fours, half crawling, half running. But the predator wasn't after Chester. Not yet. From across the street, three men, local thugs known for running moonshine and extorting the farmers, emerged from the back of the saloon, pistols tucked into their belts. They laughed and joked, but froze mid-step when they too felt the wrongness in the air. One of them, Big Tommy, reached for his gun. Too slow. A flash of motion. Something struck him in the chest with enough force to lift him off his feet and slam him into a water trough. A spray of blood followed, fine as mist in the twilight. His companions barely had time to react before another figure, still semi-invisible, descended from the rooftops above. Muzzle flashes burst in the gathering dark as they fired wildly, panic stripping them of all skill. Bullets whined off metal and wood, but none found their mark. The shimmering hunter moved between them like smoke, precise and merciless. A sharp, metallic clink, and a circular blade embedded itself deep into one man's skull. He dropped without a sound. The last thug, trembling, threw down his gun and ran screaming into the fields beyond town. From the shadows, unseen eyes tracked his movement. With a low, clicking noise of satisfaction, the predator marked the fleeing man for later. There was no honor in killing prey that didn't fight. Back in the town center, the few remaining witnesses, shopkeepers, an old preacher, a mother clutching her child, peered through cracked windows and warped shutters, too terrified to move, too scared even to whisper. They had heard the tales, of course, The old stories from the native tribes about monsters who hunted the strongest, the fiercest. But those were just legends, weren't they? Chester lay frozen in the dirt, too afraid to even close his mouth. He saw it then, for just a heartbeat, as the predator's camouflage flickered. The creature was massive, easily over 7 feet tall, its skin armored and reptilian, its face obscured by a biohelmet with glowing infernal red eyes. Jagged mandibles twitched beneath the mask, tasting the fear thick in the air. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone, blending back into the landscape as if it had never been there. Only the bloodstains, the bodies, and the lingering electric terror remained. The town of Barlow Creek had been marked. The hunt had begun. The candlelight inside St. Jude's flickered violently, as if stirred by unseen winds. Sister Grace, still kneeling, clenched her hands tighter until her knuckles turned white. Her breath trembled. From somewhere deep within her, the past began to rise. Uninvited and unstoppable, flashback begins. The world shifted into a sepia-toned memory. A thunderstorm raged over Chicago, 1928, where the streets ran slick with rain and blood. The air smelled of gunpowder and cheap whiskey. Grace wasn't a nun then. She was Gracie Malone, a name spoken in hushed tones across speakeasies and backroom gambling dens. She wasn't just part of the Maranzano crime family. She was one of their deadliest enforcers, a sharp mind wrapped in a sharper trigger finger. Dressed in a tailored black suit and carrying twin Colt 45s, Grace led a brutal raid against a rival gang. The flash of Tommy guns stuttering through the alleyways echoed like mechanical screams. She moved through the chaos with chilling precision, shooting, reloading, killing without hesitation. Blood misted in the cold night air. Men pleaded, men screamed. Grace showed no mercy. She wasn't born into violence, she was forged by it. An orphan, raised on the streets, taught early that kindness was weakness. Crime offered power, money, and most of all, respect. And Grace, who had been invisible once, now demanded attention the moment she stepped into a room. One particular night haunted her more than others. A botched job. An innocent family caught in the crossfire. A man, a woman, and their little girl no older than 8. They weren't part of the war, but they ended up just as dead on the cobblestones, faces frozen in terror. Grace stared down at the small, lifeless body, her gun still warm in her hand. For the first time in years, she felt it. Guilt, crushing, suffocating. The screams of that night never left her. They clawed into her dreams, into every silent moment, until she could no longer bear her own reflection. She walked away, no warning to her crew, no last job, no goodbye, just a disappearing act, as sudden and violent as the life she'd led. Grace found herself wandering until she stumbled upon St. Jude's, a battered church offering no miracles, just walls and silence. There, she knelt for the first time, not seeking forgiveness. She knew she didn't deserve it, but begging for forgetfulness. She traded her pistols for prayer beads, her suits for a nun's habit, her name for Sister Grace. But the blood on her hands never truly washed away. It lingered, a stain beneath her skin, a wound that refused to heal. Flashback ends. Back in the present, Grace opened her eyes wet with unshed tears. The distant thunder from the approaching storm rumbled across the Montana plains. And somewhere beyond the church walls, an ancient hunter, the predator, had already begun its work. Blood was about to be spilled again, and this time, Grace would have to decide. Would she remain Sister Grace, or become Gracie Malone once more? Far beyond the Montana plains, above the storm-thick clouds, the night sky shimmered unnaturally. Not that anyone in Barlow Creek noticed. The town's few surviving souls were too busy locking doors, muttering prayers, and drowning their unease in whiskey and cigarettes. High above, invisible to human eyes, a massive ship pierced the thin layer of Earth's atmosphere. Sleek Angular and alive with alien technology, it hovered soundlessly like a phantom against the stars. Inside the ship's dimly lit interior, a tall figure prepared for the ritual. The predator, known in his own tongue as a Yautja-blooded hunter, stood before a shrine of trophies, skulls polished to gleaming white, torn from creatures hunted across countless worlds. Each bone, each scar carved into his armor told a story of battles fought and victories earned. He wasn't here by accident. Earth was a sacred hunting ground to his kind, a proving ground where only the fiercest warriors were worthy prey. The predator's clawed fingers traced the hollowed skull of a long-dead soldier, a memento from a previous hunt years ago. With a low, clicking growl of anticipation, he turned away and approached a weapons rack. One by one, he armed himself. A plasma caster mounted to his shoulder, humming with restrained power, wrist blades gleaming wickedly under the ship's bioluminescent lights. A collapsible combi stick, smart discs sharp enough to shear through steel. He chose his tools carefully. This was no random slaughter, it was a ritual. An ancient code demanded that only the worthy be hunted, only the strongest, the fastest, the most dangerous. He activated his biomask, its HUD scanning the landscape below, highlighting signs of life scattered across the lonely town. A few corrupt deputies, hard-faced farmers with rifles. And somewhere at the edge of the scan, flickering uncertainly like a dying flame, an anomaly. A woman. Her file tagged with residual combat markers, weapon use, reflexes, trauma signatures. The predator paused. This one was different. Sister Grace. The hunter marked her biosignature in his targeting system. Not prey yet, but watched, evaluated. The ship descended silently to the plains beyond the hills, its camouflage cloaking it perfectly from human eyes. With a thunderous boom that no one heard, the landing completed. The predator exited the ship into the whipping wind, his form distorting and vanishing into invisibility, his feet pressed into the earth, heavy but silent. The hunt had officially begun. He would stalk the land quietly at first, observing, studying, identifying the worthiest kills. The weak would be ignored, the cowards would be spared. But the brave, the dangerous, they would face him. The storm over Montana intensified, lightning clawing at the skies. Inside the church, Sister Grace felt a cold shiver run down her spine, an ancient instinct older than reason whispering to her. Something was coming, something that could not be bargained with, reasoned with, or outrun. And soon, survival wouldn't be about faith, it would be about fight. The storm broke just after midnight. Thunder rolled across the plains like the growl of some ancient waking beast. Rain slashed at the rooftops of Barlow Creek, turning dirt roads into rivers of mud and washing the filth of years into the gutters. Inside the town's crumbling jailhouse, Sheriff Doolin, a man whose badge was more a license for corruption than a symbol of justice, sat nursing a bottle of bourbon. The wanted posters behind him fluttered from the wind, leaking through cracked windows. He didn't notice the first distortion in the air, the faint shimmer near the door, but he noticed the clicking, low, rhythmic, hungry. He reached for his revolver, too slow. A blue flash lit the room as the predator's plasma caster fired. A blast of searing energy punched clean through Doolin's chest, pinning him against the wall like a rag doll. Blood hissed as it splattered against the hot energy beam, filling the small office with the acrid stench of burning flesh. Outside, the storm swallowed the sound of his death. Across town in Miller's saloon, a handful of local thugs, the same kind who ran protection rackets and smuggled moonshine during Prohibition, counted their earnings by oil lamplight. One of them, Red Simmons, looked up sharply. The bottles on the shelf behind the bar vibrated, faintly at first, then more violently, rattling themselves off the edge. The room grew ice cold. A shadow moved, shifted, near the broken staircase. Before any of them could speak, the predator descended. The first man's throat was slit so cleanly he tried to speak before collapsing, gurgling. Another spun around, only to be skewered through the gut by the predator's combi stick. Bullets flew, deafening in the enclosed space, but they only struck walls, furniture, never their target. The predator moved like a ghost, unstoppable and merciless. By the time the survivors stumbled into the rain, screaming for help, the saloon was a charnel house. Blood mixed with rainwater in the streets, running in crimson rivulets downhill toward the church. Inside St. Jude's, Sister Grace knelt in prayer, the roar of the storm battering against the stained glass windows. Her hands shook, though whether from cold or some deeper fear, she could not say. Then she heard it. Screams, cut short. Grace rose slowly, clutching her rosary. This was not her battle. This was punishment. She had prayed for absolution, for a way to atone for the blood on her hands. Perhaps this storm, this unseen wrath sweeping through Barlow Creek, was the answer. A divine reckoning, a judgment she could not escape. Yet somewhere deep inside, a colder, sharper voice whispered, "This is not the work of God." In the alleys, in the back streets, and in the fields beyond the town, the predator hunted without mercy. Every target chosen carefully, only those who had blood on their hands. Every kill precise, ritualistic, a trophy carved from the corpse, then cleaned and displayed as a mark of honor. By dawn, the population of Barlow Creek had been halved. The town was no longer simply dying from poverty and despair. It was being purged piece by bloody piece. And Sister Grace, standing alone in the broken church, realized that her time was coming. She would not be spared, not because of her prayers, not because of her habit, because once, long ago, she had been a killer too. The first rays of dawn broke across Barlow Creek, casting long, blood-red shadows over the ruined town. Smoke rose in lazy tendrils from burned-out buildings. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving puddles that reflected the shattered remains of what once had been a place of life, now just death and silence. Inside the battered church, Sister Grace stood trembling, not from fear, but from decision. She had seen it all. Not just the deaths of the guilty, but innocence too. A young stable boy, no older than 15, gunned down while trying to protect his horse. A widowed schoolteacher impaled through her spine while fleeing for her life. The predator was not some instrument of divine will. It was a beast, hunting for its own savage honor, its own brutal code. It was a killer, nothing more. Grace's rosary slipped from her fingers, hitting the church floor with a soft clatter. Slowly, deliberately, she walked to the hidden panel beneath the altar, a secret she had kept buried along with her old life. Prying it open with scarred fingers, she revealed a bundle wrapped in oiled cloth. Inside, twin Colt, 45 pistols, polished, oiled, ready. Grace cradled them like old friends. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer, not for forgiveness, but for strength. When she opened them, the soft gentleness of Sister Grace was gone. Standing there, framed by broken stained glass and stormlight, was Gracie Malone, street enforcer, killer, survivor. And she was ready. The showdown began at the town square. The predator stood amidst the wreckage, trophy bones hanging from its belt, its cloaking field shimmering on and off as it scanned for new targets. Grace moved through the ruins like smoke, silent, deadly. She knew the rules of survival. Don't fight fair. Strike where it hurts the most. She set traps, jury-rigged explosives made from old mining charges. She lured it into choke points, forcing it into narrow alleys where its plasma caster couldn't lock on properly. She used mirrors and broken windows to mislead its targeting system. The first real blow she landed came fast, As the predator prowled down a narrow alley, Grace emerged from a rooftop, twin pistols barking. One shot struck its shoulder, making the beast roar in fury. Neon green blood splattered across the dirt. The predator whirled, firing wildly, plasma bolts carving smoking craters into walls and roofs. Grace ducked and rolled behind an abandoned wagon, reloading with lightning speed. She wasn't stronger, she wasn't faster, but she was smarter. Using the town's broken landscape like a weapon, she danced around the predator, leading it into dead zones, forcing it to waste energy, forcing it to bleed. Every move was calculated, every shot measured. Finally, wounded and enraged, the predator disabled its cloaking, stepping into the open with a roar that shook the broken windows. It charged. Grace met it head-on. Ducking under a wild swing of its wrist blades, she fired point-blank into its gut, each shot hammering home with brutal precision. The beast stumbled but didn't fall. It backhanded her, sending her crashing through a storefront window. Blood streamed from a gash on her forehead. Bones screamed in protest as she pulled herself to her feet, coughing dust from her lungs. The predator advanced, dragging its combi stick behind it like an executioner's axe. Grace smiled grimly. Not yet. She feigned weakness, a stagger to the left, baiting it. The predator lunged. At the last second, Grace threw herself backward, hitting a hidden detonator strapped to her belt. Boom! The explosive she'd planted earlier ripped through the ground beneath the predator's feet, sending it flying. Before it could recover, she was on it, emptying both pistols into its chest. Click, click, empty. The predator, armor shattered and bleeding heavily, rose to its knees, still refusing to die. In a final act of desperate honor, it reached for its self-destruct device. Grace, panting, battered and broken, aimed one last shot, a hidden derringer tucked into her boot. She fired. The bullet smashed through the predator's wrist panel, destroying the detonation sequence before it could trigger. The beast slumped forward, defeated at last. Grace collapsed beside the corpse, staring at the storm-ravaged sky. In that moment, she wasn't Sister Grace. She wasn't Gracie Malone. She was simply Grace, a soul who had fought, bled, and survived. Again. As the sun rose over the ruins of Barlow Creek, Grace whispered a prayer, not for salvation, but for peace. And this time, maybe, someone was listening. The battlefield was silent now. Only the crackle of dying flames and the distant rumble of thunder filled the morning air. Predator's massive body lay broken in the dirt, green blood staining the earth around it. Grace stood over it, chest heaving, guns hanging limply in her hands. Every muscle in her body screamed in agony. Blood dripped from a dozen cuts and bruises. She was alive, but just barely. The predator, still breathing in ragged, shallow gasps, lifted its head weakly, their eyes locked, alien and human, warrior and warrior. And in that final moment, Grace saw something unexpected. Respect. Not hatred, not rage, just acknowledgement. They were both survivors of worlds soaked in blood, both prisoners of their own violent pasts. The predator let out a guttural clicking noise, a sound almost like a death chant, before its body finally went still, slumping forward into the mud. It was over. Grace stumbled backward, collapsing against a broken lamppost. She let her pistols drop into the dirt, the weight of them suddenly unbearable. Tears blurred her vision, but she wasn't crying for the town, not even for herself. She was crying because after everything, after all the blood spilled, all the battles fought, nothing had truly changed. Violence had saved her life tonight, but it had cost her something even greater. She stared at her own trembling hands, remembering the years she had fought so hard to bury Gracie Malone. And now, in order to survive, she had become her again. Grace tilted her head back, staring at the roiling clouds above. "Is this all I am?" she whispered into the empty dawn. "Just a killer wearing a rosary?" There was no answer. Only the cold, endless wind, carrying away the echoes of gunfire and death. As the sun rose higher, lighting up the wreckage of Barlow Creek, Grace made a decision. She would not pick up those guns again. She would not become the thing she had once been. The world might be broken, monsters might roam both heaven and earth, but she would fight, not with bullets, but with something far more dangerous. Hope. Hope that someday, somewhere, the cycle could end. That violence wouldn't be the only language left to speak. With slow, steady steps, Sister Grace walked away from the battlefield, leaving behind the weapons, the corpse, and the broken town. Not victorious, but free. Maybe for the first time. 6 months later, the hills beyond Barlow Creek had begun to heal. Grass grew where once there was only scorched earth. Wildflowers pushed stubbornly through the cracked ground, splashing color against the ruins of a forgotten town. At the edge of this new life, a small, rebuilt chapel stood, simple, humble, made of salvaged wood and stone, built not for grandeur, but for peace. Inside, Sister Grace moved quietly among the pews, placing fresh candles near the altar. Her hands, once so quick with a gun, now worked patiently with wood, cloth, and prayer. Children laughed outside, chasing each other around the graves of old sins. The community was small, broken souls, runaways, survivors, but it was growing. Each day was a battle, but this time, she fought with kindness instead of bullets. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the mountains, painting the sky in fire and gold, Grace stood at the chapel's doorway, watching the horizon. A soft breeze stirred her hair. She smiled, and for the first time in years, it wasn't a mask. It was real. But then, she heard it. That faint, familiar clicking sound carried on the wind. Her smile faded. Grace's hand moved instinctively to her side, where no gun rested now. The fields lay empty. The children laughed in the distance, unaware. Was it just a memory? A ghost of the past? Or was someone, watching? Grace closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the scent of the earth, the sky, the coming night. When she opened them, there was no fear. If the past came hunting again, it would not find her the same woman, not a killer, not a coward, but something far stronger. Someone who had faced the monster within and won. With steady steps, Grace turned back toward the chapel, her silhouette framed against the dying sun. The wind carried the faint clicking away into silence. For now, fade out. End.